Hi everyone. Our topic this week is accessible design for kitchens and baths. In the introduction to your NKBA Kitchen and Bath Planning Guidelines, you are reminded to approach projects with a focus on inclusivity, to accommodate the needs of all occupants, and to consider the different types of experience in a home: visual, auditory, cognitive, and tactile experiences. And specifically, these guidelines address mobility as part of universal design. There is a wide spectrum of differing abilities in the human experience, right? And we can kind of categorize those abilities that affect our design of the built environment, right, into mobility, vision, hearing, and cognition, right? And you can further break down the mobility section to body function, arm function, and hand function, right? Those are very important. So I invite you to pause this video and take a closer look at this slide and see if you can understand these different abilities that affect how a user addresses your space. Now, as we design our kitchens and baths, all right, most of the accommodations that we need to make are for issues with mobility. And so there are different variables to consider, right? And one of those is the level of mobility of your user. They could be standing, ambulatory, standing with assistance, or seated, right? And the other variable is how long is this disability going to continue? Is it short term or long term? There's a difference between universal design and accessibility. There's a little bit of a vocabulary difference or a different idea. Right? We have been focusing on, in this course, universal design, right, which is more applicable to custom residential projects. Right? Accessibility has to do with access-related standards. They are typically minimum criteria, right, for people with disabilities, and they are mostly applicable to public spaces. Let's take a look at some of these accessibility regulations. Starting on the left, the NKBA Planning Guideline is not an accessibility regulation. All right, these are recommendations, not rules. And the recommendations you see in here, and then we're going to talk about in the next lecture, next slides. In general, they align with the ADA rules, but they often are more generous. Right? We also have these two items here are federal law, the Fair Housing Act and the ADA. Right? Fair Housing Act applies to multifamily residential. Right? The ADA applies to places of a public accommodation, which is mostly commercial facilities. Right? Because these are federal law, these two are enforced by litigation. Right? You as a building owner, you have to get sued, all right, before they are enforced. Moving on to building code, these last three sections right here are all California building code. The first one here, the California Plumbing Code, includes some minimum sizes and spacings, and these are required for single-family homes and would therefore apply to our kitchen and bath projects, right? Because they are referenced in the California Residential Code. The other one, California Building Code Chapter 11A and 11B, all right, don't apply to single-family homes. All right, 11A is for housing accessibility and applies to multifamily projects. All right. And 11B is for public buildings, all right, and applies to all the commercial facilities. These roughly compare with the Fair Housing Act and the ADA, right? And all of these California building codes are enforced by permits and inspection. Across all of these different regulations, there are some accessibility concepts that apply. And we've covered a couple of them already in this course, and then we're going to go in more detail this week. Those concepts are clear floor space, maneuvering clearances, reach ranges, and then some specifics for accessible fixtures and appliances. So we're going to start our discussion right here with maneuvering clearances at doors. In general, accessible doors should have a clear opening width of at least 34 inches. In most cases, this requires an actual door panel of 36 inches or 3 feet. All right, because the actual width of the panel plus the hardware will protrude into the opening, all right, and we need a full clear opening width of 34 inches. It's important to give enough space around your doorway in order for someone to pull up and open it and being able to maneuver around. Your NKBA planning guidelines book gives this illustration, right? So you can see that there is some room needed, right, to get to that door. But let's take a closer look. In general, there are, I think, 6 different ways that someone can approach a door. All right. Notice right here we have our door. All right, and it's swinging towards this direction. So you can see that this is the pull side of a door, and this would be the push side. If someone is coming through the door, they in this direction, they would push. And if they're coming from this direction, they would pull. There's also the hinge side, right, and the latch side, depending on how the door opens. And finally, someone can approach a door in the front, all right, a front approach, or they can approach from the side. So their body would be 90 degrees to the way that the door opens. All of these different ways of approaching the door require slightly different clearances, amounts of room in order to reach and operate the door. Your NKBA diagram here is kind of condensing all of them into one general clearance that is good for multiple approaches, and it's a pretty good general guideline. If you need more specifics, you can take a look at the California Code. All right, here we have the diagrams for front approach. All right, so you can see that there are different clearances needed for a front approach pull side or push side of a door, and then varying whether there is an actual closer and a latch on the door or if it's just a simple hung door. Your side approach is divided into hinge or latch approach. In this case, we are approaching the door from its hinge side, so perhaps coming from this way or coming from this way, but approaching to the hinge side. And finally, a side approach from the latch side of a door. In this case, we would be approaching in this direction to the latch side, and in this direction. All right, in this video, we just kicked off our study of accessible design for kitchens and baths. We touched on the connection with universal design, the different aspects and variables that you need to keep in mind as you're designing, the various regulations that are in place, and then took a look at maneuvering clearances around doors.